Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today is Cheyenne, and she is a financial coach. And you say, why? Because I know that there is a great deal of people in this community where finances is an immense hurdle in dealing with our grief. And I want you to have the tools, I want you to have access to people that can help you. And Cheyenne, you will hear in this discussion, is going to provide you with the ability to not just say if I have money or not, but change the narrative that is in your mind. Not to look at it at just the textile part as far as the technical terms, but understand your relationship with money, what you can do to empower yourself to change it, and how you can have a different scenario in your life and in your future as it relates to things that you need to manage with money. Let's get into the discussion now.
Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today is Miss Cheyenne Syverson, and she is a financial coach. Yes, I did say coach, because when you're dealing with your money, isn't it better sometimes to have someone that's going to coach you through? I'm a life coach, so I can relate to that. And when I hear that word as it relates to your money, you're telling someone what your expectations are, what your goals, and they are encouraging you and coaching you through making that decision. But that's just my conversation. We'll see when Cheyenne, what she says that is really going to give us the scoop on it, which is why she's here. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tina.
And oh, I forgot to mention because I'm always wanting to get right into the conversation. If or when you decide to work with Cheyenne, she is supporting the widowhood. And when you reach out to her, please mention the code IS, the number 4U dash WRTWT. And she is going to be so kind to give you a 10% discount for her services. And I'll mention that again later, and they'll be in the show notes. But let's get right into this. And I want you to know, Cheyenne is an early riser. She got me up. She got your girl up at 7 a.m. to have this conversation. So I'm excited for the early bird mentality.
Oh yes, I've actually been up since about 2:30 because it's 5 o'clock my time. So
Oh my gosh, you got me. Sometimes that now Monday through Friday, I am up like at 4 a.m. I think my body has learned it is Saturday. Oof. Come down a little bit. So where are you from originally?
I'm originally from northern Minnesota, just a small town about an hour and a half away from the Canadian border.
Okay. Have you lived there your entire life or where are you at now?
I am in Wyoming now. I moved here about 18 years ago I transferred with my job here.
Okay.
And I love the mountains and all the outdoor activities that Wyoming has to offer. So.
It does sound when I just hear the word Wyoming, I just think of something picturesque and just relaxing. I mean, I know it's not like that when you're driving to work every day, or maybe you can see the mountains from where you're at, or do you have to travel someplace to actually enjoy them?
You can actually see them from the town.
Oh,
To actually get into them, though, it takes about half hour
okay.
to actually be at the foothills, but you can see them from town. Yeah, so it's a beautiful, beautiful way to wake up.
Yes. So financial coaching, how did you get into that? And explain what that means.
Sure. Well, it's a funny story actually
Okay.
because I started in high school taking an assessment that said you'll do really good with numbers. I thought, yeah, that's funny. And I loved animals. So I actually have a degree in animal science and equine science, believe it or not. And I was hired before I finished college into an intern position doing agricultural lending because of that background. And so that's how I got started into finance. And once I got into it, I realized, wow, we're really not taught a whole lot about it, and started to ask a lot of questions. And while I started doing my training, started to help people in my place of employment, I started to share a lot more concepts of things that I was learning from other people. And so what financial coaching to me is just helping people tell themselves a better story around their money. I realized through the journey that we're just not taught. Even in my degree, I wasn't taught money management. When I first started, I really didn't even, I had to change a marketing class to even have a basic introduction to finance before went into my job. I was like, really? Why? How do you go into production agriculture? Or that's where I had expected to go and be able to be profitable when I didn't even know really how to manage money other than always pay your bills first and live on the rest second was how I was brought up. And when I went into lending, I scratched my head going, why don't people have better credit if they're paying everything with cash? Until I realized that your credit score is strictly how you manage credit. It has really nothing to do with how you manage money. And then it just started bringing up more curiosity and more thoughts around it. And then life kept happening and I'd work on getting debt paid off because of course going out of college, I had college debt and, started a family and all those things. And I just started working more and more with people, helping them better understand through my own experiences and through the experiences of others where they'd run into problems. And then I've always been a growth mindset. So I've always done a lot of reading, listening to podcasts. And for a long time, I just like, why aren't they teaching this? Why aren't they teaching this? Until one time I was listening to a podcast and it said, why not you? And I said, well, why not me? And so I started to grow that thought of going into financial coaching so I could reach more people than what I was reaching just through my job. Because I've been in the lending industry for then almost 20 years already. And so that's where I've got my experience.
Thank you. Do you work with men and women?
Yeah, I work with really anybody that wants to have a conversation
And
because
I should say whatever they sexually identify as too. So you
right.
don't work with one particular group of people. I apologize for not being clear.
Yeah, nope, it doesn't matter to me. Just whoever wants to be open-minded and look at things a little different, tell themselves a different story around their money. And I help them understand that a lot of what you learned before the age of 7, and 95% of what you do is actually unconscious thought. So a lot of their habits around money is stuff that they're just doing habitually and not even realizing it. And I'll preface to say I'm not a therapist, but we do a lot of mind work to help people understand not to judge themselves for where they've been, because you're making the best decisions you have based on the information you have at that moment. And so I always encourage people to say, well, up until now, this is what I was doing, but moving forward, this is how I'm going to do life different. Because you really can justify either way. You can justify spending or you can justify savings. And so instead of just doing technical work with people around their money, like budgeting, because most people are like, oh, a budget. Like, no, I'm not going to tell you can't spend. We're just going to look at where did your money go and help you understand why it went there and help you reevaluate and go, well, do I really need to habitually buy that cup of coffee every day? Or can I use it as a way of celebrating at the end of the week when, yes, I made it at home. Now I saved money and I have more money to put into to grow for me, right? Because you'll never save your way into financial success. You have to have other ways of making money. You want your money to grow for you. And we're just not even taught, we'll justify that habit of spending. And so oftentimes I'll work with people and say, okay, what's one thing you buy all the time? And we'll multiply it through. And most people are shocked with how much they spend in a year on it. And I do that just for them to realize that, wow, I didn't realize I spent that much going out to eat, having the cup of coffee or whatever else is something that you just naturally go buy because you're at the store. And
Thank you. And I want to say this conversation is so necessary for my community. I am a finance and accounting major. So those are things that are ingrained in me. But when you're married or in a partnership and one person takes a particular role in the household and another person takes a different one, if the person that is the money manager has died, this person that is remaining is now having to pick up very heavy responsibilities in a lane that they are not familiar with. nor most of the time are they comfortable with, more importantly, because they have become comfortable with their partner taking on the financial piece. So they're now having to be responsible for their entire finances in the most stressful and mentally challenging experience of their life. Also, there may be situations where people have received life insurance, or maybe the spouse or partner that is no longer here had a 401k retirement distribution. So now they may have known about money, but they've always had the conversation with their partner as far as where do we see money going. So their relationship with money was based on this relationship. Another situation where people are in, just for some context of the conversation, we did a little bit talking before, that some people, as you mentioned, have seen money as a subject of taboo. They never really talk about it. It's something you get, and you want to be very private about what you have, and you don't want to look too boastful if you have too much, or what are you doing in those things. So our conversation will probably surround about that. One thing that you said, and it's something that appears to cross over into any situation, that as you said, you're changing people, you're helping people change their mindset about what they think about money, and to realize they made the best decision with the information they have. And when I am working with people in life coaching and dealing with guilt, and letting them know you made the best decision at that moment with the information you had. Guilt can come into play because you're now in your present sense looking back at what old you did. Of course, old you has the numbers to win the lottery from yesterday. But so you can't guilt trip yourself from not winning the lottery yesterday because you didn't have that knowledge. And
Right.
nor can someone put guilt on themselves for something they did previously with money. But once they start working with someone like yourself, now taking that energy and choosing to do the leaning in to make the change. And I'll say this last thing. We were talking in our pre-conversation, and I we talked about savings, and I shared that my late husband, and when the children were small, after we would leave coming home from church, we would always stop and get something quick to take out to eat. And it didn't seem like a lot of money. And some people go, well, okay, it's a family of four, maybe it's 20 or $30, and we get something real quick. That's easy. But I was keeping our money. I used Quicken and calculating how we're spending our money. And at the end of like 3 or 6 month period, I looked at how much $30 or $40 every week was costing us. And it was like, I didn't know where some funds were just sort of dwindling away from. But
Mhm.
doing that allowed me to go, okay, sitting down with my husband, going, this is how much money we are spending every Sunday. And he was like, okay, that adds up. So we adjusted our grocery bill to have items that when we came home, we could quickly make something to eat while people are changing clothes, and still had the same benefit as what we were trying, but a better economical return. So
Mhm.
thank you for mentioning that practical exercise that you do.
Yeah, yeah, it's really important to take a look at that, and what you're doing by doing that, you're bringing it into awareness, into your conscious thought, so that you can reframe it. Because if it stays where you just keep doing it unconsciously, you'll continue to make that same decision. And your brain is trainable by the choices you make as long as you bring it into your conscious thought. So once you start to retrain it and say, I want to look for ways to save money, now you start retraining that mindset, and your mind will start working for you, just as the same as what you're saying. Oh, we justify going out to eat because we were in a hurry and we just wanted something quick and easy, not really having that conscious thought of the financial aspect of that, right? But then once you brought it into awareness, you told yourself a different story, you brought it into that conscious thought, then you were able to do something different. And then your brain started saying, hey, remember we have food at home, we'll just eat there. And so
Yeah.
it actually helped you to continue that, just the same as it will help you to keep spending just the same. And I actually call them leaky windows in my coaching program, when you have that $15 app that you just signed up for and you forgot about. And I do it as a compound interest. So you have your compound interest is how that money grows, right? And so you take that $15 a month and over, say, a period of 20 years, say, and your investment return now is just a rough ballpark of 8% over 20 years. If you contributed $15 into that vehicle that grew your money at that rate, and just throwing out hypothetical numbers, it would be over $8,000 in 20 years with less than $4,000 of your own contribution. So when you start to look at that, then you start to go, wait a minute, where else am I spending 15, 20, $100 that I'm just throwing out in the breeze per se, that could be actually being grown in a vehicle that grows your money. Now, I'm not an investment planner or a certified financial planner, but even when you talk to them, you're able to put more money into whatever vehicle is growing your money. So you have more for retirement and other life events. And so it's just important to be aware of that and start to re-look at it. So I invite people to say, okay, you've spent this much money up until now. So what would it look if you did it a little differently? And on the other side with compound interest, just think if you put that meal on your credit card and you don't pay it off every month. Now you're paying the credit card company 18, 22% interest or more for that $30 you just spent. Now, not only are you not putting the money into your vehicle to grow your money, you're putting it into the big bankers to grow their money at 20-some% interest.
Yes. I thank you. I want to go back in on a very basic level.
Mhm.
Can you explain compound interest? And I don't want to skip over some terms that may not be in someone's wheelhouse of ever hearing. Can
Sure.
you do a breakdown of what compound interest is a little bit, please?
Sure, absolutely. So compound interest is, so say you have your money in a bank account. We'll just use that as an example. And you notice that every once in a while you get a few pennies given to you, deposited into your account as a dividend per se. Well, that's money that you earn without doing anything for it. Just by allowing the bank to use your money, it's paying you that. Usually it's not even a percent. Some places do, but that's money you earned on top of the money you put in there just because you put it in there. And so that interest compounds. What that means is if you leave it in there, now you have those, few dollars earning more money that you didn't have to start with. So you have your balance that you originally put in there. You have the interest they paid you. And then you have now gaining interest on the interest and on your balance. And so
Okay.
that just compounds and accrues and gets bigger. And so no matter what vehicle you pick, of course, the higher the interest rate or the amount that they're paying you gives you more compound interest. You have more interest earning interest. And on the adverse effect is, say you have your mortgage and some people are like, yeah, I'm going to refinance my mortgage. My money is tight. Well, if they haven't made a current payment, and so now you have this whole month of interest, that's actually capitalizing the interest. So now you're going to pay the bank interest on interest because of that refinance. So when you refinance something, I always recommend that you at least pay your accrued interest before you refinance so that you're not paying interest now on interest. So do you see how that works both ways
Oh, no,
versus
I certainly do. I wanted to make sure
versus
that
getting
people
it?
that are listening
Oh, yes,
understand
absolutely.
the concept. So I want to do a little bit of numbers with the
Yeah,
compound interest just to make sure that it's understandable. And we'll work with some whole numbers. So let's say I have $100 in my savings account, and this is money that I am not touching. I am leaving it in the savings account. I have decided that once a quarter, I'm going to be able to put $100 and not touch it. That's the long-term savings. So let's say I get $10, just for number's sake. Let's say I put $100 in that a savings account. They give me $10 of interest. Now I have $110. The next quarter, when my interest is calculated, it is calculated on that $110. And so I get another $10, so maybe 20 just to make it funny. So you get $20. So now I have $130. Now, the next time interest is calculated, it is now calculated on the $100 I originally put in, this $30 of interest I received from whatever my investment is or dividends, and now I'm getting another. So it's compounding on top of each other. Is that a very basic way to be
Yeah,
able to explain?
absolutely. Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Now, as far as you use another term that I want to make sure that is understandable, accrued interest. And it is basically the same situation in a reverse scenario
Correct.
that we had $100 that I borrowed from a
Mhm.
financial institution. They have now charged me interest. And so now I know, and I didn't make the payment. You mentioned a scenario which is really good about the mortgage. So I my spouse died, the person's spouses died, and they didn't have money to pay the mortgage that first month. So the mortgage went by. So they now have their mortgage of $1,000 plus another $100 of interest that they have to pay, which is $1,100. So now when they're going to make that second payment, they have the payment that is due that month plus the 1,000 from last month, the $100 interest, and then probably a 30 or $45 late fee on top of that. And so now this gets into a very interesting conversation that the person that has been living in a means that was maintainable because their spouse was alive, and now their spouse passes, they obtain a single windfall of money. But if they, and this is the part that gets in the coaching part, the family home, making that decision that me as the remaining partner may or may not have the regular income flow to maintain that quality of life. I have this single windfall of money, and I could put that and cover the mortgage payment probably for maybe a year or three, but I'm not making enough money to be able to replenish the funds to be able to maintain that home for my lifetime. And so now I'm at a place of trying to disconnect the emotional attachment to this place and what I need to do with money. How would you coach me through such a thing like that?
Sure. We would explore your attachment first and see what is it. And I understand that you already are going through turmoil, right? Your whole life is pivoting. And you want to look at the long term. Long term, do you need the house? How would it feel if you just had enough funds to serve, to live, not just survive, but to live life? Do you want to hold on to that house and then live meagerly and barely figure out how to make it? Or is it, we're looking at selling the house and getting into a house that's more affordable where that money can go longer better?
And I want to pause right there. You said the word meager. I
Yep.
I want you to hold it, but I want to share some examples from widows that have spoken with me. So when people are listening to this, it's in perspective.
Sure.
I am talking to people who, once they pay the mortgage, pay the utilities, they have no money left. They are not moving their car. They barely have enough food to eat. All of the majority of their money has gone into making this mortgage payment because in their mind, I told him I would keep the house. We said this house was the most important thing. We worked so hard. He worked so many hours to keep this house. But when they run the numbers, they can almost see the inevitable down the road that now at some point in time they're not going to be able to maintain it. So when you use the word meager, I just want people to really digest that because there's going to be a new widow or widower or a life partner listening to this and saying, I, I may not be a financial wizard, but I know I need help overcoming this hurdle
Mhm.
of where I'm thinking with money versus the logic part, because 2 plus 2 is going to equal 4. If you have $50,000 and the mortgage is going to be 5,000 a month and you don't make that amount of money, it's going to run out. So thank you for using that word. I just wanted to give some examples that you go through that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important. And that's how I invite people on any expense that they're making. How would it feel if? What would it look like when you did, if you did this instead? To just take a different awareness to it. You know, honoring your spouse that they worked hard for it is great, but you don't want to do it to your detriment in your future. And they would want you to, I would assume, want you to honor life, right?
Yes.
And so to embrace them, you know, and it might be, you know, taking pictures of that home and making that memory something that you can look back on and go, this was such an amazing time, and embrace it for the moment that it was, because now you're making new moments. And it is challenging. It's just like even selling stuff that you've had for a long time, or giving away the clothes that you no longer can use anymore. So I'm not, it's the memories really that we hold on to. That article of clothing or something, it's not that, right? It's the memory that you created in that, right?
Oh,
And
for
the
sure.
same, where it's the memories you created in there. So how I would invite people to make like a memorial over it, you know, take those pictures of that place and honor the memories from it,
Mhm. That
and
is
then
really
move
good
on.
because there you and I'm glad that you mentioned you set that up well because one is my attachment emotionally to the home. Two, in selling the home, we have to deal with the contents, the idea of the items in the house, the clothing. Some people that I speak with, their spouse may have passed 2, 3, 5 years, and all of their belongings are in the same place where their spouse left them. They have not touched them. So it can seem too big of an on taking. I know I'm probably going to lose the house, but I can't bear to deal with all these other different things. And that, what you're helping people do, is not something a financial advisor is going to walk with them on
Mhm.
that level. And people need to understand there is a difference. Someone may work with you for a year and then have their situation turned around where they're now in a place to work with a financial advisor. And what would you say to that, or how does that process normally go?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'd coach through them, and we'd want them to find that advisor. I have several I could recommend, depending on who you connect with. I'm all about like who resonates with you, who makes sense to you, because everybody has their niche, their people that they work well with. And you want to make sure that you're comfortable with them, because they will manage your money. They will
Mhm.
help you with that. And I help them understand why you want to be able to put more money into it. So it would be something we would cohesively work together, because now, okay, as we re tell ourselves a new story around how much money we want to put away and how we can put away more to grow for us so we don't have to work for everyone, they
Okay.
can amplify that with their strategies that they know. And so it would be kind of a cohesive unit. I wouldn't even say wait the year,
Oh, okay.
because if the sooner you can start, the best time to start growing your money was yesterday. The next best time is today, right? Uh,
Yes.
I heard this example one time, and I don't have exactly all the details, but it was essentially someone that started at the age of 27 and only put money in for like 10 years versus someone that didn't start till 37 and then put in a bunch of money. By the time they both got to age of retirement, the one that only invested young but for 10 years actually had more money
Yes.
than the person that started 10 years after the fact and then put in a whole bunch more money, because of that power of compound interest. And so the sooner you can start having your money work for you, and however you look, whatever investment vehicle, that growth vehicle that you look at, the longer and the more consistent you are with that, the better outcome you have.
I
And
like the
that's,
power of compound money. I like that statement. That is important
yeah,
to hear. Can you share with us some of your favorite success stories or experiences in working with people? Obviously, not using their names, but just the
Sure.
process from maybe beginning to where you brought that person to.
Sure, absolutely. So I had one individual, her situation is a little different in the sense that she went through a divorce, but she still faced the same thing. She was a similar thing as far as financially. She was with her parents and she got married. And so she went from her parents to married, and her ex-spouse handled the money. And he made a majority of the income for the household. Now bring her to a divorce. She didn't have any curtail on her spending. He didn't even manage it well because he just said, oh, don't use a debit card until Friday because they had ran out of funds. And so they didn't have that pause that I teach people how to pause and look at, do I really need to spend this money? She also didn't have any idea around the budgeting or even the mind strategies around it. And so I worked her through from ground zero, helping her understand that, well, up until now you did this. From here on forward, we're going to do that. And we worked through the budget. We worked on how to set up accounts. So I actually recommend people set up two different accounts, one where all their income goes into, and one where they're budgeting, where their budgeted spending for groceries, fuel, incidentals go into. Because when I worked for a credit union, what I realized is a lot of people would log into their app and say, oh yeah, I've got money, let's go out to eat. And then forget they still had their utility bill to pay because, oh, it was coming out automatically. So they set it and forget it, right? So by having those two separate accounts, it enabled her to know that when she opened up her app, that was the first one she saw was her spending account. So when she went into that, she could see, oh, I only have $20 left and I don't get paid for another few weeks.
Okay.
So then it could give her a reason to pause and go, do I really need to make this expense, spend this money on this expense or not? Because even though you have that money sitting in that other account that's accruing because you're budgeting so you're not overspending compared to what you're
Yes.
bringing in, you still have to make that conscious thought again to say, I need to transfer money for X out of that account. But you have to pause first. And that pause is so important because it helps you go, wait a minute, do I really need it? Or is this just something I want? Is it something that I really need? Is it an emergency? Like the tire went flat and I need a new tire? Okay. Or is it just, I want to go out to eat because I've had a rough week? Like what
B.
story are you telling about?
The rough
Right.
week.
Right. So, but building in the pause, and a lot of what I coach is those, what are your triggers? What can cause that pause so that you do your money different because again, you're wanting to break that habit of how your brain is trained and retrain it. And to do that, you have to put that pause in there. I have, for example, a do not buy list. So when I bought a case of something or an extra, like I already had the extra on the shelf, I put it on my do not buy list as a reminder to my mind that I've already bought it. Because what I realized is I would tell my mind before grocery shopping, oh, I needed a bottle of ketchup. So we go to the grocery store, we buy the bottle of ketchup. 10 times later, I'm putting it back on the shelf again going, why did I do that again? I really didn't need 10 bottles of ketchup, right? But it's because I told my brain, I need to remember to buy this. So my brain kept reminding me to buy it.
Mm,
But now with that do not buy list, it's a reminder, it's that built-in pause that says, oh, I already had that taken care of. Remember, we bought it last time. And that is just helping retrain my brain that, oh yeah, because life is busy. And it's
yes.
so easy to set that little thought in your head and you forgot that you told it that. And you go about your day and you keep doing, your brain keeps reminding you over and over. And you can apply that concept to so many different things to just build that pause, build that
Mm,
stop, and it'll help you retrain how you look at it. And it's kind of like writing down your schedule, right? If you're trying to keep your schedule in your head, your mind is constantly, you know, hamster wheel that thing around in your head over and over and over again so you don't forget that. But if you write it down or you have it in your calendar and you rely on your alarms, you can rely on your calendars, now your brain doesn't have to think about it. It can think about other things. And so just ways of clearing your mind so that you can consciously make different decisions.
you mentioned a word that is used very often in the grief community, i.e., trigger. Can you explain what that looks like in the financial coaching world instead of what people hear that word and their mind may have went to something different? If you could
Sure.
bring that into perspective for how you assist people, what that looks like.
Sure. We assess it in two different ways. One is the emotional side. What is triggering you, the emotional side, when you're handling your money? Is it something your spouse did and now you're anxious? Or so how can we deal with that? What's the story around that? I help people through that to better understand why does that create that anxiety when, oh, your spouse went and spent something. Maybe you're the one managing the money and your child goes and spends something. You're like, oh, I didn't have that money to spend. Okay, why is that a trigger? How can we go through that? The other way is triggering that pause response is, okay, how can I remind my mind to pause and make a better or a different decision around my money?
Okay.
So it's just something like that do not buy list is a trigger to my mind going, oh yeah, we're good with that. So their triggers can be benefits and detriment depending on how you use them and how you look at them.
When you are working with people, and this is a big swag, average, I start working with you. On average, how long does it take before my mind starts to do this shift where the aha moment comes and it's more inspiring, enthusiastic to do the work versus I know I'm supposed to do this, and so I'm gonna do this because I have to.
Right. I've had people with just one session start to retrain that. And,
Wow.
I've had people where it's only taken a couple sessions, and I have one, like the one that started from ground zero that took several months of, because we were also working through the mind strategies that came from the divorce too.
Okay.
So it really just depends on where they're at in their growth. I've worked with other consultants and coaches that do other things and they're already open-minded and they have a different perspective in life.
I see.
So they'll catch those things and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I worked with someone that had all the technical aspects of money, but she wanted that mind strategies to evaluate where are some of these triggers on the anxiety side of things coming into
Okay.
play. How can we work through them and make a different story? And she got it because she was already in that process of being open to receive that information. So it just really depends on where they're at in their journey. And so I really try to meet people where they're at. That's why I say it's customized financial coaching, because I'm not going to start with compound interest for someone that never has set a budget. We're going to work on, well, I'll introduce it, because what I've realized is you can introduce a lot of things. And over time, some of those things will start to come back and the little light bulb will go off in your head and you go, I get it now. But if I wouldn't have sparked that interest initially,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have had that thought later. So we plant the little seeds and water them to grow, right? And so I really try to meet people where they're at. What, is it a one-off? Is it, here and there? I don't want them to feel pressured into a 6-month or a 1 year, because it takes time. It's a journey. It's not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
And even with my own reframing, the buying of the multiple things and the justifying saving versus spending, it took several months of reminding my brain when the ego would step in and say, let's go to lunch. And it took a while to train the brain to say, no, remember you brought lunch, or you're going to go to have lunch at home and you already have stuff. We don't need to stop, because once you really start to evaluate, what are you buying? Is it good for me? How long does it take? I used to go out for breakfast. I could grab a coffee and a breakfast bagel. I could actually, by the time you figured out the time you waited in line, even if
Mm-hmm.
you called in early, I still ended up getting to work at the same time had I just fried a couple eggs and had a glass of milk. It took the same time. So you train society and the marketing trains your brain thinking, oh, but it's convenient and it saves you time.
And it's
So you
so
must
cool.
go. And it's so cool and it's so easy. And it actually doesn't take you any less time, and I think I shared on our pre-call about the justifying going out to eat. What I realize is a lot of people justify going out to eat because they tell themselves, oh, I don't feel like cooking. Really, it's because no one wants to make a decision on what to eat. Yet when they go to the restaurant, they still have to make a decision on what to eat. So all they're doing is pushing off the decision. Not making a decision is still making a decision. And ultimately, when you start to retrain that brain that I'm looking for ways to save instead of spend, you start planning your groceries different. So you have staples at home for that quick, easy meal. I don't know how many times I've literally just had a grilled cheese sandwich with my boys because none of us could make a decision. It was quick and easy, and we just needed food. Done. Grilled cheese sandwich it is, right? Not the
Yeah.
healthiest option, but it still
Oh,
fills.
no, no, no. You can doctor up a grilled cheese sandwich. I am learning something from my current husband. He, forgive me for those people who are vegetarian, but you're probably not eating the grilled cheese anyway. You can
Right.
put bacon in there. You can put tomato. He puts 3 or 4 different types of cheeses in there. He made a grilled cheese sandwich the other day. I was like, I have not been living right. Like, I didn't even know a grilled cheese sandwich could be like all of this. And then you throw in some tomato soup with that and put a little cream in the tomato soup and some oregano and basil. It's a whole different thing. And then you can probably teach the boys how to make the grilled cheese and make it a teachable moment. There's a lot of things that can come from that.
Yep.
And it goes back to how you tell that story. And
Right.
in regards to telling yourself story, have you come across any particular taboos that people have in relation to money or a negative mindset that has been inherited or ingrained from generation and they didn't even realize it's what their great grandparent did and that's how they came to this concept, anything of that sort?
Yeah, actually a few different options. I've had some people say, well, they play the victim role and go, well, why didn't my parents teach me? And it's like, well, how could they teach you if they didn't know? So then it takes them out of that victim role, realizing that it wasn't something that they did. Their parents did the best they could with what they had, right? The other thing that I've noticed is that in the older generations, you had people that experienced the Great Depression. So either they were embarrassed because they didn't have money, or they saved everything and they didn't want people to know they had money.
Mm,
And so people just wouldn't talk about money. They wouldn't share it because either they were embarrassed or they didn't want you to know they had it. And so
okay.
then you have these generations that didn't learn it. And so how could they pass it on? Because they didn't know either. And a lot of education programs, we don't get taught it either. Or we get taught the technical aspect, but not the real applicable aspect of it. I mean, my sons have taken personal finance here locally and they started talking about net worth. Well, net worth doesn't mean anything if you don't know how to build the money, right? You know,
Yes,
so talking
yes.
about the technical terms, sure, that's a part of it, but it's such a small part of it. So much of your money is on, how to expose yourself less. Like I started going to the grocery store only twice a month because I go when I have my children. So I plan that we're going to have certain meals and then I live on the leftovers for my lunch and my dinner for the week I don't have them. But what I realized is even when I was an entire family, I still limited. And if they wasn't on the list, I didn't buy it. And so it got on the list for the next time. Because what I realized is every time you expose yourself to that, you go to the store and how many times do you end up with extra things in your cart that weren't on your list? So if you go less often, you're less likely to pick up all the extras that just clutter your closet or things like that.
Thank you. You mentioned this term a couple of times, and I just want to spend some time focusing on it. I know we've talked around it, but I want to give some light to it. You mentioned you've worked with people and you hear people use the technical terms as it relates to money, but what you're giving them is the relationship, if I'm understanding that correctly. And can you just explain that dichotomy and the power between the two?
Sure. So the technical aspect is understanding, analysis, compound interest, accrued interest, daily accrued interest, how to do a budget, the technical aspect of adding the money, subtracting the money, and what that looks like. And what I've realized through helping people with budgets is a lot of the information out there is, oh, just put a number on it. You spent this much money, or this is how much money you're going to spend on groceries. I actually help people look at where did your money go last year? And then we make a budget. Because if you say, oh, I'm only going to spend $500 on groceries and that's what I'm going to budget, in reality, if last year you spent closer to 1,000 a month because of your family size, well, then your budget is already skewed because now you're trying to fit, you know, a box of candy in a pretzel container, like you're trying to
Yes.
fit, that huge thing into this little bitty box. It's not possible. Your budget isn't going to work. And so by looking at where your money went, now we can make a budget that's realistic. And then we can start to look at, okay, well, where can we adjust from here
Okay.
with those different stories? And so the mind strategy is that real application. And then it's addressing, how have you been talking about your money? How is that relatable? I had someone that, they would buy dog treats every time they go because they just did. And they didn't realize how much money they were buying until we totaled it up, and they were just shocked because they didn't put that relationship. I had another lady when I explained that $15 leaky window, and I said, would you rather have more money in your retirement or more shoes on the shelf? And she admitted to me later, she's like, oh, that really resonated with me because my recreation is shopping, and she enjoyed it, which is great. But she never had connected how that was limiting how much money she could put away for retirement, because that was just something she did for her recreation, which recreation is great. Everybody has their own thing. So some people try to judge and say, well, why she shouldn't have been buying all that stuff. But in reality, if that's her recreation, and say a guy likes hunting or, likes cars or something like that, like there's no right or wrong on what you want to do. You just look at it differently. And that leads me to another individual who called in wanting a loan for his dream car, right? And he totally qualified, had really good income. And in our conversation, he told me, he's like, yeah, we're working on paying our mortgage off. I was like, well, how much more fun would that dream car be to drive if your mortgage was paid off? He's like, what would that look like? So we ran the numbers and determined he could actually, if he took that car payment that we already determined he could afford and applied it to what he already was paying extra to his mortgage, he could have his house paid off in less than 3 years. And if he looked at other expenses, he probably could have gotten that down to a year and a half. So then I posed the question, well, how much fun would that car be to drive now? Knowing that, he's like, yeah, let's wait on the car. I literally was ready to send him the paperwork to do the loan. But after that conversation, he realized that, it'd be a lot more fun to drive that car knowing my house is mine.
Yes.
And the other thing with cars too is, are you looking for the experience or the logical side? Like, you want more insurance, you need to store it separately. Are you really looking for, oh, I need a garage now to put the car in and have more maintenance, have more insurance? Or are you looking for the experience of driving it? If you're only looking for the experience to drive it a couple times a year, take a family vacation, make some memories, and go rent that vehicle and drive it.
Hmm.
Now you get the experience without all the other expense that comes with owning the car. So again, it's that story that you tell yourself, and that's how I work with people is, let's look at where your story's at. What have you been telling yourself? Does it serve you anymore? Or does it need to adjust?
Okay, thank you. I want to circle back to two other things.
Yeah.
One, we touched a little bit on the idea of refinancing. I am not a financial advisor. This is just my personal experience. I have my life before what we see here. I'm a finance and accounting major, and I owned an accounting business for several years, and I did mortgages with people. I want people to thrive. You mentioned something about people existing, not just living. So the statement I'm going to make is circled around my experience with that. I would have people come in and saying that they want to refinance because they want to pay off these credit card bills. And I would ask them, why would you want to put your entire home at risk to pay credit card bills that you realize you don't have the means to manage? Because dealing with the credit card not being paid is a different experience than dealing with not paying your mortgage. And I ask people to caution putting those two together, because the idea of refinancing can seem very easy because now everything is one payment and it's gone down to versus all these other. But I would often find people come back in a short period of time in the same situation and now trying to do that instead of learning how to deal with the credit card versus the separation from the mortgage. You mentioned the word refinance. We didn't really unpack that. That's a scenario, but I want you to speak about refinance however you would from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you showed a great example of that. You are not solving the ultimate problem. You're putting a band-aid on it, right? By refinancing. So now, again, back to that interest example where now you've refinanced that mortgage. Maybe you've accrued interest on your credit cards. You have interest on your mortgage. And now you're paying interest on interest again. And you're compounding the problem by refinancing it because now it frees up more money. But then if you go back and put the money back on the cards, now you're just lengthening out the time it takes. Because if you think about it, say a 30-year mortgage, if you pay the minimum payment on your credit card, it's going to take 30 years to pay. So now you're putting that onto your mortgage and doing another 30-year mortgage. And most people don't realize the interest you will pay on a mortgage over 30 years is going to be more than the principal amount, even with the low interest rates. So you have 100,000 that you spent on the house, you're going to spend over 100,000 in interest to pay the bank to have that mortgage. So I recommend, and that's where working with that story you're telling yourself is so important because I've experienced the same thing. We've used vehicles and different things to get people out of that credit card debt because the interest rate is ridiculous. For them to come back a couple years down the road, well, we were doing so good, but this happened. And that's where having the right vehicles to grow your money is so important because now you can leverage your own money or your own assets differently. But by telling yourself a different story, now you can start to curb your spending. Maybe look for other ways to make money because you can only save money to a certain point. With inflation and people, they're like, oh, well, inflation caused this. Sure, it kind of did. But in reality, you have to look at how are you spending differently now because of, rather than just still spending the same. You have to reevaluate. Well, you only can save so much. So that means let's look at other ways to make money. How else can you have a side business or some other resource of income so that you can pay things off quicker versus looking at let's refinance and get more debt. Let's look at how can we bring in more income to pay the debt down. And so when people are paying credit cards off, I say, one, don't close them because it does affect your credit. We talk about that in more depth of how they can do that, but that's a whole nother topic.
Yes.
Back to the whole paying
But that
credit
is
card.
why they need to contact you because
Right?
they may go, okay, I'm really enjoying what Cheyenne is saying, and I'm hearing all of this. And they're taking notes and they think, oh, I've learned how to do this. I guarantee you, you may take the notes, but if you don't have that relationship and that coaching, you are more than likely going to be right back having the same patterns. And I'm glad you mentioned that. There are so many other things that you're able to help people do that we will not be able to dive into in this conversation. This is more of an introduction to what they would have. And you mentioned something also, having this conversation, they get to say, I feel like I could work with Cheyenne. I've heard this conversation. I think she was relatable to me. She can understand some personal life struggles. She may have not understood the particular plight I'm having, but she has had experiences in life where I know that she understands. And to that point, I want you mentioned that when you are in the store, you have learned to tell yourself not to buy that. That sounds really good saying it quickly, but sometimes that's such a huge struggle. Like I have been in the grocery store explaining to myself why I don't need to buy something or why I do, but it sounded like you were able to just say we're not buying that and just were able to keep moving. How does one or how are you able to do that?
I have worked diligently to change the way I trained my brain to work for me. I used to justify why I wanted that and I'd buy it. Then I started going, this is not helping me. I'm doing the same behavior patterns over and over again. And so I started telling myself a different story. I started saying, I want to look for ways to save instead of spend. So the little ego, the little voice in your head that says, buy this. Yes, we need it. The brain that you've trained comes in and says, remember your goals were to save money and not spend money. And because I start putting more power to this, the ego's voice gets quieter and quieter. It's still there. I'm still human, and there's still times it wins. I'm not gonna lie. There's still times that Oreos or whatever is still appealing,
Not the
or
Oreos, yes.
whatever, right? But because I keep feeding this one, reminding myself, because then I also feed it by saying, remember, this is our goal. This is our plan. This is where we want to be in life. Realizing that this little chitter chatter of the ego kept telling me, well, just buy it. Who cares? You know, you don't know how long you're going to live. So let's just justify it. And the more you realize and really be that self-awareness, it's really bringing in that self-awareness of, oh, what are my triggers to letting ego win, right? It's going to the grocery store hungry. It's going shopping frequently. You're allowing that voice to get louder. If I don't go, guess what? It has nothing to say, right?
Nice.
And so you don't go, you don't expose yourself to marketing, because you have to think that all the packaging and the store layouts, the smells in the store, especially at dinner time. How many times is the deli making chicken when you go in there after work, right? It's because they're working with human psychology to make it appealing for you to buy more. I go morning after church. There's not as many smells. There's less people. I can get in and out a lot quicker. So if you slow down, maybe you're visiting with someone, well, it gets you off track of that mind of, I'm going to save, right? If you take time in the store and dilly-dally instead of having a list, it exposes you to more of that ego chitter chattering in your head. You know, if you wander the alley with all, or the aisles, just, well, I'm just going to look around. Okay, you're going to end up with about 20 extra things in your cart and an extra $100 that you really didn't budget to spend. But if you
Nice.
get in there and you go and you get your list, you give yourself a pause to make sure you didn't miss anything important. So you're not enticing yourself to go back because, oh, I missed the milk. Well, if you went in there for milk, maybe you should go get milk first, right? But, you know, like, make sure that you're getting the things on your list and, you know, stick with it. You know, you're human. You're going to buy those things every once in a while, but you just want to decrease your exposure to that.
Very good. Thank you. I know I've asked a lot of questions. When you thought about having this discussion, were there some particular topics that you wanted to make sure we covered that we did not?
You know, one thing would be, you know, even on your credit, you know, people are coming from challenging places. Maybe they've made those human decisions, right, that haven't really helped their financial status. And I really remind people that, one, your credit is pliable, it can come back. You can recover it with the right strategy. You can get out of your debt, you can bring in more income. It's a journey, it's not a destination, but it needs you as the driver. And you can't be looking in your rearview mirror. You have to learn from the lessons of your rearview mirror and then keep driving forward, making a different decision, getting more information to make a better decision. And, you know, don't stuff your head in the sand, because that's still not going to resolve anything. That's the biggest, you know, one of the biggest challenges I have is people will be like, oh, well, I'm just going to justify it anyways. Like, okay, then you're going to find yourself in the same spot tomorrow and the next day. And so be open to learn and just letting it be as it was, because that's just what happened. And
Mm.
now you can create a new future and a new identity for yourself in that.
One other thing, thank you for that. We are living in unprecedented times where so many people are struggling economically from society, not even now including the impact of the loss of a partner, that we had this financial plan of what we were going to do with life. If I'm this person that's struggling financially and I hardly have enough money now, why would I think I would want to spend money to work with somebody to tell me stories about money that I don't have?
Sure. I actually had someone that I worked with, just even on their discovery call, went back and revisited and saved $800 in a month, and just by one conversation. And it's just something, because we do so many things out of habit. We're not realizing how much money we are sinking into things we don't need. And, you know, I keep the cost down because I want more people to have it. I have other options. If you want to do a group, I do a free discovery call to say, hey, where are you at? And so by realizing that a coach can get you to this level versus staying down at the bottom level can mean a lot of money growth for you. But if you don't have the coach or the awareness of it, you're going to stay down here living paycheck to paycheck instead of opening your mind to the possibilities of more, because your ceiling is only where you place it.
Okay, nice. I will allow you to close out this conversation with final comments. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for accepting my invitation to talk to the community and have these conversations. There are so many people, this is their first time being responsible financially, and working with someone such as yourself would be that easy step into understanding finances versus going, and I have a financial advisor, but I also have a financial background. And we started that early on. And this may be someone's first opportunity of dealing with money, and they may feel intimidated by going to straight to a financial advisor because they feel like they already have to have a plan of sort of what they want, and this financial advisor is going to help them execute the plan. So being able to work with someone that can help them understand themselves as it relates to money is very empowering. And that's why I was glad to be able to have you and have this conversation. So I really appreciate it. And I'll let you close us out with whatever final words or direction. And please know in the show notes or wherever you're watching this, the links to be able to reach out to Cheyenne will be listed there. And please be sure to mention the code IS4UWRTWT. Go ahead and close us out. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity you posed here, because my whole goal is really to reach out to as many people as I can with the different perspective of life. I've been through it. I've been through medical issues. I've been through a house fire and lost everything, to a business deal gone bad, to a divorce, to losing my job. And life just keeps happening, right? And so I want to meet people where they're at, because I realize we're not getting this information. And so my goal is to just help people where they're at with the stories they're telling them and help them do it better, taking back their life one financial decision at a time.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.